Hey, how's it going, guys? My name is Puzzle. I'm just gonna get straight to the point. Today's not really too much of a planned video. I've just written down a few of the points that I'm gonna be talking about today, and it might be a little longer because it's just gonna be a huge rant video, and I'm not gonna really edit it too much either. So I hope you can still enjoy it, even though it is sort of this longer form of content. But I just wanted to sort of speak from my heart and from my experience, because this is a very serious topic, and I think this issue is probably one of the biggest issues we're facing right now. And I'm sort of making this video to get a lot off my chest, because these are sort of problems that I've been sort of contemplating a lot, and I thought I may as well make it into a video, because I was sort of ranting about it in my room anyway. So I just want to sort of express it in my own words, in my own video, and that's what this video is going to be. Long enough an intro, so let's just get straight to it. The topic is how society, Western society, has failed us, and especially men, but because it's failed men, it's failed women as well, because now, I'll get into it as well, but society's just failed us in general, and I'm not even gonna lie, I genuinely wish I was alive at a different time, or in a different part of the world, because if you're a man living in Western society, it's one of the worst times in modern history, apart from I guess the war. But even honestly, at this point, at least in war, men had a purpose, men had a drive, men had families to fight for. Nowadays it's all been stripped away from us. I'm just gonna get into it, because obviously me just saying it don't mean anything. I actually want to explain on all these points that I'm about to mention, so let's get into it. Being a man in today's society is really hard. I'm not going to be try play a victim or anything, but being a man in today's society is hard, and it generally is so easy to become depressed, and for us to sort of lack a purpose in life because of all these problems we have now, and not even for men as well, for women as well. And I want to just get into these. I think a huge problem facing men in Western society is loneliness. And loneliness is a huge problem, because nowadays social media is obviously huge. We're the first generation that's grown up on social media, and I think that's very damaging for us, especially at such a young age. Obviously you can look at stuff like attention span, obviously I don't know, physical health, not too good for your physical health, but what it does whilst you're growing up, it could actually have detrimental effects. Because you think about it, how do we advance as a society? We make these sort of advancements through inventions and things. So you take the Renaissance, let's say, or just these great periods of invention, and you take people like Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, these great people who just invented all these fascinating things and advanced society forward because of their inventions. And if you actually take a look at Isaac Newton, obviously you may know he discovered gravity, and the way he did that is he looked at an apple fall. He saw an apple fall, and then he sort of wondered, how did that apple fall? But what many people don't know is how did that end up happening. The reason, because he was just standing about doing nothing. And I feel that's so important nowadays. I did sort of steal that bit from another YouTube video, but I think it's so important because boredom is generally the key to success. Nowadays, boredom doesn't essentially exist, or well, it does, but we don't force ourselves to be bored because of social media, because of the internet. We sort of always, and especially now, it's becoming easier to access. Obviously, it's becoming more addicting than ever. The people behind the apps and everything, they're designing it to make it as addicting as possible, and for you to stay on the app as long as possible. So because we've been sort of raised on social media, raised on the internet, what essentially ends up happening is when we're bored, we just switch to our phones, or switch to our laptops, or switch to whatever technology and whatever gadgets we have, even video games. I can link that as well, because it's all really part of just digital basically stuff. So social media, internet and video games, all of them are just a huge problem, because we're sort of raised on that. We're the first generation, like I said, that was essentially raised with the internet and with social media fully. And what that basically does is we've been sort of like almost indoctrinated as children as like this key time where we were supposed to be learning what we find fun, our passions, our hobbies, instead of like actually exploring them. And that's the whole point of boredom really as a child, is you're meant to discover what you enjoy and what your passions are. For example, like if you wanted to become a footballer, as a kid you'd spend like hours of boredom, and then once you discovered football you'd find that incredibly fun and you would want to pursue that. But nowadays as kids, whenever we're faced with that boredom, it puts us out of our comfort zone, and we just instantly switch to the gadgets. It's like a safety blanket really. We just all switch to the gadgets, and then what that creates is it just ruins that possibility for greatness. So now that person could have honestly gone on to achieve great things, but it's been hindered by all these internet, all the social media, etc. And furthermore, on social media, I think it is so ironic that social media is meant to connect us, yet social media has ruins like just people's social lives really. It's actually fucked how social media has like ruined relationships. So let's take a moment to look at like romantic relationships, for example. Because of social media and stuff, it's become easier to do like this hookup culture basically. And what that means is sort of girls, because in the dating market basically it's very look-centric, and it's hyper competitive as well, because if you take the dating apps, it's like a large majority of men. I'm pretty sure it's like 70% men, 30% females. So what that creates is basically means that there's less females, so the females are more desirable than the males. So what you end up getting is like this 70% of men all want the 30% of females, and then because the females have so much choice, they're obviously going to pick the best men. So, and because nowadays you take a look basically back 30 years ago, if a girl wanted to date someone, they actually had to go and meet that person. Like, you couldn't actually like go date someone across the world or anything. But now with hookup culture, you could. Why would a girl choose you if she could? Yeah, that's from a Hamza video. But why would a girl choose you if she could pick someone from Dubai who's gonna fly her over for free, get her the best luxury things ever? And that's sort of hookup culture in a nutshell. And it's basically the top like 1% of men are getting all the attention of girls, whereas the bottom 99% of like men are literally getting, well, the average man is like getting no attraction from females whatsoever, whereas even like not even like attractive girls can get all the attention from guys. So what that leads is this sort of disconnect, and then a lot of men obviously feeling lonely, which can obviously lead to depression. So what we see with that basically is men are now lonelier than ever. Even if you're like a good looking man with a good job, nowadays that's not even enough in the dating market. You have to be sort of almost like, you almost have to be rich and have to be like a really good looking guy and handsome and obviously like charismatic and everything. So even if you're an average looking guy and you actually like Hamza said again, like back in the day that would have got guaranteed that you'd have like a wife and kids. But nowadays it's so hyper competitive that even if you're a good, like you can literally be like a 7 out of 10, have like a decent paying job, yet you could still get no validation from girls and get like no attention from females and feel incredibly lonely. So that's like the first major point of a video that I wanted to address, is loneliness. Now the next point I actually want to is address masculinity, which has sort of been killed by Western society. Masculinity has been killed, it's sort of been eradicated. It's been seen as this toxic thing, and this again leads to male unhappiness and male depression. So masculinity has been on a huge decline in the past like 50 years, a bit less, but I would argue like 1960s, 1970s was like the last, like the peak of masculinity before it started to decline, basically. So I feel like after like the 1970s it slowly began to like gradually decline, and now like after 2000 it began to decline even more, and now we've like after 2010 it fucking skyrocketed down, bro. And now we're the least masculine men to ever exist. We've got the least testosterone. So just putting that into perspective as well, your great grandfather would have like triple the amount of testosterone as you. People's like handshake grip has gone down by like half almost. It's like gone down by like 30% in the past like 30 years. Well, 40 years actually. But that's also just goes to show that masculinity is on a huge decline, and it's sort of leaving us wondering how has this happened, and is it a bad thing, as feminism asks, like is it a bad thing? And I just sort of want to get into that now. So I think the main reasons for this is just comfort in men, and if you know the quote, comfort is a killer of men, and I think that's especially true in like Western society now, because what has happened, you think about it, like I said, 1960s, 1970s, that was almost like the last good point of masculinity. And if you take a look back at that, you take a look at society, where was it? It was after the Second World War, and we were still, I'm pretty sure that was around when, after that, like 1960s, 1970s, like, but we were still in conflict. There was like the Cold War and everything. So it was, even though we had like the victory of World War II, society was like at its greatest point at the time, but we were still under some threat of like the Soviet Union and stuff. So men, we needed to, as men, we had a huge role. We needed to serve our country, and we needed to serve our families. And obviously, the reason men were so masculine back then is because we had to be masculine. We had to have these masculine traits of being strong, being courageous, and hardworking, because we were in times that actually we needed those traits. And you take a look at modern society, it's crazy, because like we're not actually too safe. If you actually take a look, we're actually closest to World War III than we've ever been since World War II. And there's obviously like China. If you actually look at stuff like about China and Russia, I mean Russia not so much, because Russia has sort of been heavily impacted by the Ukraine war. But if you actually take a look at China, it's scary. It's generally scary what like China has implications for the future. And if China was to like invade, it could generally be a very, very scary and dystopian future for us. And that's like that's a huge fear for me. But a lot of people in this Western society don't realise this, and we're living through this period of sort of comfort, because obviously now with us, I feel like it's like Hamza against it. I know I keep referring to Hamza, but because I do learn a lot from Hamza as well. Hamza's one of my favourite YouTubers. But we're sort of at the end of this comfort point. Like, we're seeing the war in Ukraine, but it's only inevitable since we're going to see war with us. But I'm going to get further upon that near the end of the video. My point is now as men, we're sort of, as a society, we're deemed as like sort of safe, right? Like we've got no threats. So, like, we can just live our lives normally and not have to go through any of that. So already we're sort of, we don't have to be as masculine or as hardworking, let's say, because we don't have any dangers, any threats, like sort of harming us. So already we don't actually have a reason to be as masculine as we used to be. So we're naturally going to see a slight decline, because we're a bit safe, innit? Like, we're living this safe life, so there's not as much reason to be hyper masculine. But so it would steadily decline, but not too much. And then so why has it declined? Like, skyrocketed down. The reason, well, another reason is because modern, like, sort of just things that have been invented which like seem sort of good but bad at the same time. So technology has made huge advancements in the past 20-30 years. Like, bro, it's actually, you think about it, but like 30 years ago a phone was, well, you think about it, like 40 years ago they didn't even have like smartphones or all, but the phones were like this big to call on. And it's actually mad to think, because it's not even that long ago. So the advances in technology were so like drastic, and obviously this has come at the expense of us as well. a bit, because obviously now, like I mentioned earlier, video games and internet, all this stuff has huge consequences, and because this stuff is so new as well, like we don't actually realize the huge extent of all these problems. But not even just technology. Technology is like one part of it, but also just like the advancements, sort of, well, not advancements, just because of like the with like, actually, if you take a look at it, the dietary pyramid or something, there's like a conspiracy, but like it's all because of this guy basically said that what was it, fats and stuff are really bad, and it turns out the thing was flawed, but it changed like the food pyramid like permanently, or the food circle thing or whatever. So because of that guy, basically now we've got like a lot of carb foods and like a lot of sugary foods. So obviously that's a huge reason, because like there's lots of studies into how like junk food drastically lowers your testosterone and stuff. So obviously like food and stuff has also decreased our testosterone even more, and testosterone is basically like almost like a man's measure of how much a man he is, or how masculine a man is. That's basically what like I view testosterone as a bit. So obviously then that's decreased it even more, because we've got all these high sugary, high like sort of just unhealthy food, like this processed food that is just shit for our bodies, bro. Like it's just horrible food, man. And then furthermore, stuff like obviously masturbation has because of that also links with sort of a male loneliness. One way like men sort of cope with the loneliness is through masturbation, and especially porn as well, which really fucks up your brain as well. You shouldn't be watching porn as a man. It's really, really bad for you. Again, because it's so new and there's been so little research, we don't actually know the extent of how bad it is. But the research that has been done has shown that it is really bad. So, and as there's going to be more research, we're probably going to realise it's much worse than we initially thought. So obviously, porn, masturbation, junk food, all this stuff decreases our testosterone even more. So I've always had some sort of like reasons for the decrease in masculinity, but then there's like feminism as well, which is sort of the next point, which is feminism, and how it's not helped the problem of masculinity at all, and it's even further worsened it, because now feminism started as a good movement, obviously, but in the past 10 years it's taken a turn for the fucking worst, bro. It's so bad now, man. Feminism is ruining society, man. Western society has become like incredibly woke, so now there's we can't even like think normally, bro. Like nowadays we're sort of told what to think, if you know what I mean. Like feminists and stuff, they just tell us what to think. We're not even allowed to form an opinion for ourselves anymore, and there's stuff like cancel culture, which basically scares anyone from speaking their true opinions. But luckily, like platforms like YouTube still allow us to express our opinions, so I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful there's sort of this uprising of men who obviously see past through the lies of this and see how like obviously harmful it is for us. So I am grateful for that, but it's a huge problem, because nowadays men are generally too scared to even express their opinions, because we're sort of told what to think, and then because constructive criticism is sort of dead nowadays, because of like stuff like cancel culture or just ostracization, and we just sort of, people are labelled nowadays. So if you disagree with someone's like woke opinions, you're just labelled, so they'll just label you a misogynist, a sexist, a racist, anything to just sort of silence you. And that's my huge issue with like what just sort of society has sort of taken in the last 10 years with feminism and just woke, just become woke in general. I know I'm rambling a bit here, but I hope I can get my point across, because what I'm trying to just basically say is, because of the way like cancel culture and stuff has sort of stopped men, and well, women as well actually. Cancel culture obviously affects both, but it just stops like people from expressing their opinions, so, and sort of like challenging this woke narrative. And the woke narrative is also very harmful, because what they're basically telling us, what these like opinions are, that they're sort of like just telling us that we should believe, and you can't contradict them or anything, is just like sort of this feminist sort of idea, which is that there's always inequality, and like men are sort of almost like villainized all the time, really, because men are seen as sort of oppressive all the time, even though nowadays, like, a woman can do, if you live in a Western country like USA or UK, a woman can do basically anything a man can do. And obviously, like, men still have advantages in some areas, but so do women in other areas. Like, women are, like, that's another thing I hate about feminism as well, is like, it fails to address that men and women are different. Men and women can never be equal because we're different. Men are always going to be better at sports because they're more athletic. That's just how men are physically. You can't change that. That's just natural. You can't really argue. That's what feminism is trying to do. They're just trying to argue with science at this point, bro. They're trying to argue like how there's 50 genders, how obviously like it's just turned into bullshit, bro. And the fact that someone like me can just call out that like feminism is just all the things that they're saying is bullshit, and the fact that that's seen as offensive nowadays is fucked, bro. How is like something like that, me calling that out, is seen as sort of offensive? The fact that I think that there's only boys and girls, like that's seen as offensive nowadays because this woke narrative, and you're just sort of silenced nowadays. You can't even have an opinion nowadays, bro. But yeah, men are gonna be better at like athletic stuff because men, that's just natural, bro. That's the whole point of like human sort of. Men were always the ones who were hunting, so they needed to be more athletic. Then the woman would like provide for the family, so obviously women are going to be better at like aspects that men won't as well. So men are going to be better at like sports and also like stuff like maths and stuff, whereas women are going to be like better at stuff like art, music, caring for their family and providing, because that's just natural. That's what's meant to be. And I think we need to revert back to traditional gender roles, because it's really harmful what this sort of like modern takes are doing, because it's just they're just putting men down and like villainizing men for being men. What modern day feminism fails to realise is men and women are different, so by trying to make them equal in parts where they can never be equal, for example in sports, men and women will never be equal in sports, that's just a fact. So by trying to always strive for this equality, which is sort of, you can never achieve that in aspects like that. So I hate that feminism is trying to do that. Like, they're always making it out to be like, oh, there's always this such, it's always against for women, for example, like the gender pay gap or whatever is a myth, because men are tend to work harder. And I hate this as well, because today's International Women's Day, obviously, and in my school I had an assembly, and man, I hated it so much because it was just taking these random facts out of context, and then the teacher doing the assembly was trying to just show how society is so sexist against women, and not even like the explanations of why the statistics were like that was so simple. For example, like, oh, the female Premier League gets paid way less than a male Premier League, and like the answer to that is obvious, bro. It's not because they're women, it's because it generates less revenue. They have smaller stadiums, barely anyone actually goes to watch female football. The athletic ability as well. Females are just going to be worse at sports than men. So obviously that also contributes to how much people are going to watch it. And just in general, like, not many people watch women's sports. And sure, you could argue because that's an up and then yeah, they argued on that point. The teacher said, oh yeah, because it's up and coming. So why are you acting like it's sexist then? If it's up and coming, then why are you acting like, oh, they're getting paid less because they're women? Then furthermore, you were arguing about how 11 of, I forgot the fact, but it's like 11 of like the top 100 billionaires, CEOs or something like that are females. And she literally explained the point, yet she still tried to make it seem sexist. So she literally said the point for it being, which is true, and the reason is because females tend to spend a lot more time like focusing on the family, because that's how they naturally are, whereas men tend to be like more dedicated to their goals. So a man, for example, is more like, if for example a male billionaire, he's more likely to like strive to be a billionaire, because men are willing to sort of put things in their life aside to achieve their goals, whereas females tend to like care more about family, care more about their life rather than like achieving goals. And actually I think both of those are good things. I don't think we should be like making like females so masculine, because it just creates this huge like divide and it makes everything just worse, man. Because then we're left with masculine females and then feminine men. So you're basically reversing sort of like the how nature is meant to be. You're reversing it, and what it leads to is it especially impacts the men, because when men are feminine, men are less happy, because men as a species, we want to strive, we want to achieve, because that's what naturally men are meant to do. We're meant to be hunting out in the wild, we're meant to be conquering. So when men are then placed and become feminine by this society and stuff, what ends up happening is we become extremely like we're not happy with the way we're living, because we want to be achieving all this, yet we're just weak and fragile, really. And the whole point of having these masculine men is to protect their families and to protect like their countries and stuff. And further, I'm going to get that because that's going to be near the end of the video, but how is a modern man going to protect their country, especially now because we're closer to World War III than ever? How is a modern man meant to protect? Because the woman can't, because the woman isn't as physically strong as a man. So a woman can't fight as well as a man. The woman is not as athletic as a man. So we're just hindering both sexes here. What is going to end up happening is we're going to have like a race of, well, we already do, a race of degenerate men who are extremely weak. They have to go to war, and then they're fighting up against strong masculine men who have a purpose, who have reason to be fighting, who are masculine. And who do you think is going to come out on top? Well, it's definitely not the feminine degenerate men, I'll tell you that. So on the point of masculinity, feminism is making it so much worse. I mean, with education as well, education is making us more feminine as well. Because education, especially the last 10 years again, like I feel like schools, especially in like UK and USA, they've become way more feminist. Like, it's actually scary, because it's actually scary because like in my school, for example, we're taught like every week, basically every month, we're sort of like, well, every week we have an assembly, but like every month it's always like related to like sexism. For example, it was only like 2 months ago where we had an assembly specifically about Andrew Tate and how he's a bad role model, and it was just a feminist narrative of Andrew Tate and taking stuff out of context, and it's actually scary to me, because I think it's sickening that they're sort of teaching kids their opinion. Like, as a kid who's growing up, they can be easily influenced, so like they should be able to form their own opinions by telling them what they should believe. That's sickening to me, bro. That's actually sickening, because they're forcing their opinions on kids and sort of influencing them to have this woke opinions, bro. I think that's actually fucked, bro, because you think about it, like imagine, bro, imagine being a parent and you're sending your kids to school for like the teachers there to be teaching them like shit you don't want them to be being taught about, bro. I think it's actually sickening, because it's like, it's somewhat subtle, but it's once you realise it, it's actually sickening, because they're just forcing their opinions onto you, bro. They're not even letting you have your own opinions nowadays. And with my school as well, they're sort of like, they do it subtly, but like, if you do have sort of like an opinion about masculinity and or self-improvement, you sort of like, they try like re-guide you or whatever, and they fucking like tell you you're wrong for that. It's fucking sickening, man. And then obviously in school you're taught to be feminine, because you can't talk in class, you can't be a man, well, can't be like a young boy, you can't mess about or anything, so we're taught to be feminine. So obviously that doesn't help the masculinity problem. And yeah, like feminism, school, food, social media, porn, masturbation, video games, all of this, it all leads to this sharp decline in testosterone and in masculinity. So if you take a look at all these problems in Western society, it's clear that men don't have a purpose, because we're lonely, and when we don't have a purpose, we're less masculine as well, and we don't have a reason to be living. So what does all this lead to? All this like lack of masculinity, lack of purpose. well, it leads to depression. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing a huge uprising in depression. Men's mental health is not talked enough about, and when it is talked about, it really is not in the right way, because we're sort of told to open up, and we're taught like the feminine way of like getting through depression, which is sort of like to go seek therapy and like, or go ask for help. But in reality, that doesn't work, because the root cause for this depression is all these things I just mentioned. So by opening up and by being feminine, that's not actually going to fix the problem. It might be like temporarily fix it, but it won't fix it. The real reason for this like root cause of depression is because men are feminine, men are weak, men are lonely, men lack a purpose. No wonder no one's happy nowadays, bro. No man's happy, because the men are lonely, the men lack a purpose, and no one's even masculine anymore. So what we're seeing is this huge increase in suicides. The suicide rate has gone through the roof, and 3/4 of them are men, which is a high percentage. And then obviously, because of this depression now, men are obviously more prone to substance abuse and stuff like that. So we're seeing a huge rise of depression, and a huge rise in suicides, in drug use, in alcohol use, in smoking, in vaping as well. Vaping is horrible, man. I actually hate vaping so much. The fact vaping is not being like addressed in media is actually sickening, because I think vaping is worse than smoking at this point. It's so addicting, like it's actually sickening, because in my school, year 7s are vaping, and it's so normal for like a year 7 to be vaping. Do you know how fucked that is? That's a 12-year-old. 12-year-olds are actually vaping, and I would argue in my school, a solid like 1/6 of students vape. That is actually sickening to me, because so much like young developing people are already becoming addicted to this nicotine and like addicted to vaping and stuff. It's actually fucked, because like, bro, the chemicals in that shit is bad for you, bro. You should not be having that, especially at that age, man. It's fucking sickening. And the way they make it as well, they make it so addicting. Same with like social media and stuff. Like the amount of people at a young age who are exposed to it, which then leads to them basically being addicts for life, which is also sickening. But that's just another problem, like Western society not being able to contain, like I don't know, it's just not able to contain like stuff like vapes and like social media, technology. It's all just gone out of hand, man. So what we're left with is a race of men who are all, well, mostly just losers, depressed, have no reason to live and no purpose. So they turn to these substances. They turn back to the thing that made them sort of depressed in the first place, which is like the food, the video games, the junk food, because that's all they've ever known. And then they turn back to it, and the problem becomes even worse. And even worse, a lot of them end up killing themselves. And like the fact this shit's not even being addressed, like all these problems I'm on about, is sickening, because this is generally what's leading to like male suicides. The fact, this is another thing about the feminist movement, like they're sort of contributing, I would argue they're contributing to like male unhappiness and then male suicide. So I think it's sickening that like feminists and the feminist movement pretends to care about like male suicides, yet they're contributing to the problem. It's actually sickening, because they pretend to care, but they really don't. Like, and it's such a huge problem, yet no one talks about it, bro. Like, and it's only getting worse. Like, if you see the rate, the chat is going through the roof, and it's only going to get worse as well. Like, I would argue now, like the whole death of masculinity and shit is at its all-time low, and it's going to get even lower. I mean, sure, like we've got stuff like Andrew Tate, and I think we've seen a huge like uprising in men as well, and I think that's because like obviously once you hit rock bottom, the only place you can go is up. I think that's one reason for it, but we will still see like a more of an increase in depression and suicide. So like you generally, and it's actually sad, because let's say the statistics are going to be showing basically like if you know, I don't know, if you know like if you're in a school, for example, like you're almost guaranteed that like someone in your year is going to kill themselves, like some guy in your year think about that. Some guy in your year is going to kill themselves. How, in the future, how does that make you feel, bro? Like, that's, if that doesn't, like, scream that there is a problem in this Western society, then I don't know what the fuck does. Because that's just sickening to me, man. Like, someone in your year will, in the future, kill themselves because of society, man. And finally, like I, foreshadowed earlier in the video, the last point is sort of going to be war. And I think because men have become so weak, and like I said earlier, the reason men were so masculine back in like the 60s and 70s is because we were just back from like a huge war, and we were still in general conflict, so we had a reason and a purpose to be masculine. We needed to be masculine. We had no choice because we had to because we were in constant threat. But now, because we're sort of in this age of comfort, but I think that comfort is generally coming to an end. We are closest than ever to World War III, and men, as a society, we are not prepared. And what else was it like? On average, an empire or whatever rules for some amount of number of years, and Western society has ruled for that number of years, and so generally there's a lot of signs to show that Western society is coming to an end, and it is collapsing, and part of it is because of us. We sort of collapsed it from the inside, because now we've become so weak. The rest of the world is noticing that, and you've got places like China who are capitalizing on it. Like TikTok, for example, is owned by China, so China is basically collecting information. The Chinese government is collecting information about basically everyone who owns TikTok. All that information is going to the Chinese government. Think about how fucked that is. And you know we're not doing it for good purposes either, bro. China has some fucked up plans, bro. I'm scared of China, man. But it's very scary, like, it's just, if you've read the book 1984, bro, it's literally that, man. It's like Big Brother, man. That's what China's gonna become. It's really scared. It's really scary. Like this, it's gonna be becoming like dystopian future, bro. Because like no man can even fight for their country nowadays, man. Like when these men get drafted for war, what do you think is gonna happen, man? Do you think like this guy who's played Call of Duty will actually know how to fucking shoot a gun? No, man. He's gonna fucking die instantly, man. Anyway, oh yeah, also I wanted to sort of do a bonus point of like economy, and I guess you could kind of link that with war, but yeah, the economy is at an all-time low as well, because just in general, the resources and shit are going like down. Like there's not a lot of resources. Resources are getting like used up in the world. So shit like oil in the future we will be fighting for. So that's even gonna cause more conflicts and more war. So it's not looking good for the future, which is like it's already not looking good for the future. But the worst thing is men are not prepared for the future. The modern man is not prepared to actually face, because the modern man is not masculine. The modern man doesn't actually know how to face hardship and how to work hard. So what we're going to see in the future is we're going to see a collapse in Western society. The rate it is going, because men have become so weak and so docile, and now when we need to be strong, we're not going to be strong. So that's what I hope self-improvement can like help, is we need now, especially as men, we need to become masculine again, and reclaim that masculinity, reclaim that masculine drive, and reclaim like us being a man. We need to be men again, because now especially we need it. And you've got the economy is also, yeah, the bonus point is just going to be about economy. So now generally life is actually not great if you're living in Western society, because it's on the brink of collapse. And this is not actually related to war. This is just related to like cost of living and stuff. Obviously, if inflation has gotten a bit out of hand recently, and so like even if you're working a decent job, you could still like be almost living like you're in poverty. Like it's actually sad, but like one of my teachers was sort of saying how like obviously a teacher makes like a average salary, but they literally can't even afford heating or can't even afford a breakfast. They can't even afford one of their meals of a day because of like the cost of living and shit. It's generally saddening, and it just shows like Western society has failed. Like I don't know like the reasons for like how the economy's collapsed and shit. Probably because like wars and stuff. But I haven't paid attention that much in history. I do like learning about history though a lot. But actually I don't know. Maybe I should know that actually. But the economy's obviously gone bad. So that once again causes like male depression. That's an extra reason for like that male depression, and like so the reason for like depression is the loneliness, and then you could pile that on, which is like the economy. But yeah, so now men are just depressed, we're lonely, and now when we need to be men, we're weak. So what we need to do is we need to reclaim that like masculine dominance, and we need to reclaim our aggression. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it's a long video, and at times you probably like didn't even understand what I was saying, bro. Sometimes when I ramble, I just say random shit, bro. I just waffle on. But I didn't really want to like make a edited video or anything, because I genuinely just, before this video, I just had a lot on my mind that I wanted to like, sort of discuss, and I didn't really have anyone to discuss it with. So I just sort of thought, you know what, pick up a camera, pick up my phone. Oh, that's what I'm recording on. Pick up my phone and just, you know, record the video and share my opinion. So if you are watching this, I doubt you are. I know it is kind of boring, especially like if you're like a modern man. You know, your dopamine receptors are pretty fucked, so you probably didn't even watch to the end because of your attention span. But if you did, thank you. Subscribe, maybe like, and yeah, save.